everyone. My name is Sherine Abdi, and I'm joined with Angela Princewill. And today we're going to be talking about love it, but you just got to list it. And really, it's about practical considerations and thinking when it comes to the matrimonial home. And yeah, so we'll just dive right in. The most common issue is, can you afford to keep the home? And I think a lot of the time, people are not practical when it comes to that idea. It's just that, I've lived here, I can do it. The reality is you're coming from a dual income, perspective to now a different shift. And so I don't know if Angela, you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I like being practical. I mean, I like to pride myself on it, so I share my wisdom with everyone who asks. But all jokes aside, this is one area where we really affordability is just something people really need to put their mind to. And I know that a lot of times, especially for families with children, there's the consideration of, changing the kids' school or, the kids have made memories in this home. Well, you might be surprised that the memories they've made aren't that great. You would be surprised that that school you're struggling to keep the kids in, maybe they even want a fresh start, right? You don't know. Like, yes, I hopefully, for those watching, you have great relationship with your kids and they're telling you everything. But there's times when I've had conversations with children and it's a little bit disconnected from what the parents are saying. The children would rather have a happy present parent than a parent that's stressed because they're struggling to afford this home. So that's I just want to start from that point of view. Like it can't be or it shouldn't be keep this house against all odds and nothing else happens. I don't care if we eat canned meals forever as long as we keep this house. It should just be, yes, there is a change. I agree that, having a parent gone and having to change schools and having to live in a new place might be a lot and it might be overwhelming. But frankly, studies have found that it's more overwhelming for the adults, actually, that the kids are fine. But I think what would be worse than all of that is not having a relaxed parent. And I'm thinking of a situation where either the children are living with one parent primarily or they share it. So the affordability is not just from by making every penny work because you might have sat with your mortgage broker, they stretched everything for you down to the penny. But how do you feel like if the thought of the expenses on the home is overwhelming, I don't know, then it's not affordable in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are, valid points, right? You have children. I mean, some might be upset that they do have to leave their school, but the one thing there are studies that have shown us is that children are very resilient. So, if the practical consideration is that, you just simply can't afford it, then, at the end of the day, ripping off the band-aid faster sometimes is the easiest way. I say about transitions when it comes to, maybe keeping it closer to the end of the school year. So, you're not doing a move, in the midst of like, the school year and things like that. And in terms of like affordability, just things that people have to think about are just, maybe co-signing and third party co-signing to assist you to take on the debt. Qualifying for financing, a lot of people just say, yeah, I'll buy you out, but they don't really know what that means. And then cash flow issues. If, for example, if you're the support payor who's trying to keep the property, you also have to think about the obligations that you might have as well to also have to pay on top of a mortgage, the carrying cost, and any residual issues, and sometimes there are situations where things happen post separation. Maybe someone is sick and there's additional stresses there. They're not earning the same level of income. There are issues where maybe the child requires additional special needs. I've had situations where children have been found on the spectrum after, and they need additional supports, which are expensive. And their coverage doesn't support that. So things to consider. And I mean, I know we're throwing a lot out there at you, but just these kinds of things that, would impact your decision. So you need to be thinking ahead, so that you're not blindsided where, well, like, have you thought about all of these things? Is it even practical?
Yes, and that's the key word, right? The practicality of it. And in an ideal world, I just want to make that clear that in an ideal world, I would love for children to remain in the homes that they are. There's no doubt. Well, in an ideal world, it would be nice if parties weren't separating. It is what it is. It would be in an ideal world, both parties would cooperate. Even if, and we've seen these in cases. I have done agreements where one parent has agreed. I remember I did one several years ago where they agreed, the children were in elementary school at the time. I think maybe grade 3 or thereabout was the oldest child. And they agreed that, my client could keep the home until after high school. So, and no, there was no payout done at the time. We support was adjusted to kind of account for that, but that was an ideal situation, right? The parties in that case thought it was important to them for the children to have that sort of stability. Personally, it's also important to me. I like that idea. The children have sort of the same friends going through, and maybe, just maybe, it could cushion some of the disruption that comes from having a parent leave. I haven't done many of those agreements in my time. I have had a few where, if it's close to the end of high school, say a couple of years, a parent can wait, but they might take a little bit of a buyout, and then, they would get the rest later. And that worked well in a particular matter that I have. But here's the kicker: variable rates went up. So it was fine for the one party to remain in the home, pay a little bit out, and then we had an arrangement where the rest could be paid later. With interest rates going up and up and up, I can't imagine how stressed the party who's keeping the house is. And the problem, you also, I mean, if you live in the GTA, you also know that the prices of homes haven't really risen the same way they did, a couple of years ago. So this person is also kind of stuck in that situation where they can't necessarily refinance because the equities in a lot of homes have dropped and variable rates have gone up. The other party has locked in, their rate based on what it was, a couple of years ago when we negotiated this deal. So it's hopefully they will get through and things would kind of stabilize a little bit more. But I bring that to talk about, one, how rare it is to have these scenarios where the other party is that cooperative. That would be what we would like to see, right? We would like to see less conflict. And also, I also wanted to tie in the difficulties because of what you had said about, think of all the variables that could change and maybe just allow yourself a little bit of a buffer. But as a parent myself, I know I might be speaking to deaf ears when you're thinking about your children and what you believe is best for them. Practicality might be a secondary concern for you, but so we have said what we've said, but I don't know. We understand if you don't take our advice. Let's just put it that way.
No, yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, to the other, coin, what happens when, your partner doesn't agree to a buyout? And, the practical thinking behind that, a lot of people will hold off, and, believing that, and I mean, just to be a little clearer, there is no right to allow someone to buy you out of your property. So and if you guys can't agree, the reality is it's going to be listed and sold. Um, well, we'd hope it gets sold. But the reality is, like, a lot of people struggle with the idea, especially when they're tied to the idea of keeping the home, that the other person, is going to agree to some extent at some point, and I think the sooner people realize where someone else's position is at, and I'm not saying it doesn't vary, because there are people who can have differing positions, because there are creative solutions to get to a happy medium. There are, in some situations where someone is adamant about not allowing the party a proposed buyout. And I could say I've had, situations where people have done it purely on an emotion. They just don't want the other person to keep that property. It holds a lot of memories. They had renovated. I think someone had told me that they had renovated essentially the entire closet to be like this massive walkout closet, and it was, you know, pink, and it had chandeliers, and it's just the idea of allowing him to keep something that she had worked on and was really proud of was very, like, it was a non-starter for her. And I think the concern is like being a little more practical about what would actually happen in a scenario where someone is stringent on not allowing you to, you know, have the equity, or sorry, buyout option of the home.
No, that's a good point for sure. Like the sentimental. I mean, we were talking about sentimental value in terms of keeping the home. It's interesting that you're bringing in sentimental values from the perspective of someone not wanting you to keep the home. So
Exactly.
it just tells you how these things can vary, and so you really have to work with where your partner is, and if where they are is that they don't want you to buy the home from them, then you don't, there's really no right, as you said, to that buyer. But in my experience, I also find that when people are offering a buyout, there's always the disconnect between the appraised value of the home and the fair market value. And many times people would say, but the home isn't worth that much. Like, and they would get, you know, certified appraisal reports. And, for a lot of people, maybe they've refinanced and they've had the banks do an appraisal. So they have an idea of what the actual value of their home is. Again, around the jurisdiction where we practice, the difference between appraised value and fair market value is pretty large. So the other side, so if you're quantifying a buyout, say you're thinking, well, if a home is actually worth $1 million and you're calculating the buyout on that, and the other party knows, maybe they've spoken to their real estate agent or they see what's happening with their neighbors, they know they could probably easily get 1.3 million for that house. They will not agree to it. As right as you may be that the house in fact is not worth that, there is nothing a court can do. First, you don't have a right to buy them out. But here's also the other part. Even if there's such a right existed, generally courts would look at the fair market value, not the appraised value. So either way, there is no success to be had in that scenario.
Absolutely. And I mean, I had a recent court date where, you know, I'm dealing with this issue where the other party is really holding on to this home, and my client wants a proper value for a buyout. He's not open to entertaining it, but what they perceive to be the value of the property is very different. And the judge had said, you know what, if you want to keep the property, you're going to have to pay a premium for it, because that's what he believes he's entitled to, he's going to get. Then either work with that number, come to a happy medium, or sell it, because that's what's going to happen. And so, you know, there could be a premium to it, because again, some people do believe, you know, maybe if there's an updated kitchen, like they have a monetary idea of what they think that they could get the home to sell for, regardless of third parties appraisals or market conditions. You know, people have an idea of what they're willing to purchase an interest for, and sometimes it's very strict. Like, I've met people that say this home is worth exactly this, you know, may give or take a little bit, but realistically, this is the amount. I'm not going below this, and I'm not going higher. And I'm like, oh, well, I mean, you should go high, lower if you could. I mean, if that's agreed, great. But yeah, it's just, it's a very interesting concept. And I think having an idea that, you know, if you want to keep the property, have those discussions early. See if, again, all of the other variables make sense for you. And see, you know, if that's even something you're willing to entertain. And that goes kind of to our next issue, which is maximizing the equity. So if, you know, at this point, like, you have to now sell the property, you know, you want to maximize every dollar that you can. You know, what's a good time to sell? What kind of repairs are necessary? You know, we've had a recent matter where there's been mold in the home, and, you know, taking care of such an issue like that can be very expensive, but it's also not attractive to a potential buyer. So all of these things, whether or not you want to maximize the equity, and I'm sure the person who wants to buy you out doesn't really, well, I mean, at that point, you would probably have interest aligned at that point, because you're both at a position where you've accepted that it's just going to be sold to the highest bidder.
Yeah, no, oh, but it's interesting that you mentioned the buyout as well and issues with the home, because you would find that the person who wants to keep the home obviously is seeing the issues with the home that needs to be fixed and all of that. But and they're discounting the price for that. But usually when you get a real estate, when you get to the point where the real estate agent comes in and is listing the home, you find that somehow they can very easily dress up some of these issues and still get top dollar for the property. And so that's just something that always amazes me. I guess it's credit to the real estate agents. I don't know, but you know, I, they could slap on a paint here like this, a house that might look worn and unrenovated for multiple years. By the time they slap on some paint, bring in
Yeah.
some staging, like furniture for staging and whatnot, the next thing it's like, how did this house even possibly get this amount? So from a practical perspective, sometimes selling may not be that bad. You may actually get top dollar and not have to deal with the issues of repairs in the home, right? Somebody else who might have more time and resources or skills can maybe take on that project while you move into something that's better suited for your new family dynamic. But at the end of the day, I think the takeaway from this is just, as much as you love the home, you may still have to list it. And don't skimp up on repairs. I want to add this when it comes to the repairs. There's, I've had times where clients have argued about selling a home as is, and they would not put in a dollar to do anything. If it really is just cosmetics, slapping on a paint here, doing this and that, like it makes a lot of sense for you to agree to that, so that you could get more for your home. If you're the party that's refusing necessary repairs, that could be grounds, that's sufficient reason for the other joint owner to refuse to sell. Because even though as a joint owner, you have a right to a partition and sale of that home, and even though the other person doesn't have a right to buy you out, they have a right to get the maximum amount of dollar for that house. So you can't just say, we're going to sell it as is. I don't want to put a dollar into it, when maybe a couple $1,000s into it could end up helping you guys get, $20,000 more. So be practical.
Yes, be practical, and especially in that scenario, right? There are multitude of ways to deal with, from cash flow, maybe someone doesn't have the necessary repairs to pay their half of the share. There are ways if the other party does, they'll be reimbursed from the proceeds once they're dispersed, or some real estate companies and in general for in terms of staging costs, some people don't want to do staging. They actually now use that as part of commission, so that comes off all the top after you sell the home. So there are so much more creative incentives these days to or ways that I should say to maximize that equity by doing some of these things. So I wouldn't be stringent. I again always follow the advice of well, we always not say always, but we hope that you follow the advice of a real estate agent if it's reasonable and it makes sense. Most of the time, their interest is all your interests are aligned is to maximize the most that you can get for that value for that property. It's in everyone's actual financial interest to do so.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we hope, as we said, that the best case scenario applies to you and you're able to have, an amicable conversation with the partner you're separating from, or that you own the home with, on the best things that work for your family, right? Again, if you have a home together now in this real estate climate, if you can afford it, stay put, allow one party to remain in the house and just, see how things go. But if that's not, the reality for you, if you're not able to work that amicably with your partner, and having to list it is the only option that's available to you, then, do your best to maximize the value of the asset. And we hope that your family transitions to a better place where you can make even better, happier memories.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's it for today. And until next time, it's bye for now.
Bye.